Good day, everybody. This is Mr. Contreras, and this is your first of many online lectures in the world of anatomy. To begin with, today we're going to start off just learning to speak the language of anatomy by going over some general anatomical terms. First off, I want to acquaint everybody with the anatomical position. Anatomical position is a standard reference point, so everything we do in this course from here on out is going to be based upon knowing this position, and all references are going to be from this position. Very simply, if you're standing erect with your eyes forward, you're in anatomical position, but you also have to be sure that your feet are parallel and slightly apart, like you see in the picture here on the right. Now, it's very important on the last point here that your arms are forward. Palms are forward, thumbs out to the side, because in this position, the bones in your forearms, for example, are straight. There's two bones there called the radius and the ulna, which we'll be learning shortly. And in this position here, they are straight ahead. If you were to put your thumbs towards your thighs, then those two bones would cross over. And we're going to talk about those movements here later on in this course. Now, in our first unit here, as we start studying bones and everything, we're going to be using a lot of these terms. Now, yes, I know I've got the same picture there on the right, but we're going to use that here just for talking about these different directions and positions. The first pair that we're going to talk about are the anterior and posterior. In my picture here, anterior is shown by this green arrow, and posterior is by this yellow arrow right here. So basically, anterior means more to the front of the body, and posterior means more to the back. Now the next two pair of terms, superior and inferior, basically the red arrow here, right here, superior, because superior is referring to closer to the head than any other of the body structures, while inferior, the violet arrow down here, means closer to the feet or farther from the head, however you prefer to look at it. Now the next pair of terms, medial and lateral. Medial are these light blue ones here. Basically it means they're closer to the median plane. So if you're looking straight up and down here and there's an imaginary line going straight down the middle of the body, those two arrows, that would be medial. These are closer to that midline, whereas these dark green arrows here are lateral. They're more further away from the midline of the body. Now the next two pairs of terms, proximal and distal, are referring to the limbs. Okay? Proximal, shown here by this kind of reddish arrow here, means closer to the point of attachment, closer to the body trunk. Okay, while distal, this brown arrow here, referring to further away from that point of attachment to the trunk. So these two terms we're going to use only in conjunction when we're talking about the limbs. Finally, superficial and deep. Superficial means closer to the surface of the body. So like this green arrow right here, this would be an example. This is superficial. So in my example here, the breastbone is superficial to the heart, which would be deep, further away from the surface. Now obviously it should be coming aware to you here that these terms can be used different ways too, because we could also say that the breastbone is more anterior to the heart, or we could say that the heart is more posterior to the rib cage. But basically in those cases there we're going to use the terms superficial and deep. Now while these directions and position terms are very important, we'll be using those quite a bit. When we look at microscopes, we're going to be using different terms, referring to body planes and sections. Body planes, basically the body can divide it many ways. For example, a sagittal section is any lengthwise cut on the body. Now, you could use those right here, this light blue one here, a sagittal section. We have divided the body into right and left halves. But if you want to be real specific, this green plane right here that goes right down the midline is a type of sagittal plane we call the median plane. Sometimes the term is mid-sagittal plane. Now, we can also divide the body lengthwise into a frontal section or a coronal. Frontal and coronal can be used interchangeably. An example of that would be this purple line right here, dividing these up here into a front and a back half, or anterior, and posterior portions. Finally, this yellow this section right here, I've shown in two directions here. If we were to cut the body straight across, you might look up in the upper part of the body and see this. That is called a transverse section. Transverse sections are going to divide the body into superior and inferior halves. So to summarize this here, a sagittal section is basically going to divide the body into right and left halves. And a specific type of sagittal section, called a median or a mid-sagittal section, divides it into equal right and left halves. Still going lengthwise, the frontal section divides your body into anterior and posterior portions, while a transverse section divides your body into superior and inferior portions.